Let's see. Well, welcome everyone to this webinar. We're going to get started in just a second. I'm just going to give another minute to allow people to continue joining us. Thank you all for being here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us around the world. All right, well, welcome to this webinar hosted by the Sustainable Tourism Ongoing Community of Learning and Practice. My name is Ryan Fincham, and I'm the director of our Center for Protected Area Management here at Colorado State University. And together with the U.S. Forest Service International Programs, we co-host this ongoing community, as well as the 16-month cohort program, both of which are focused on bringing people together from around the world to share information, ideas, and inspiration about sustainable tourism and how it can support conservation, economic well-being, and human health. This webinar, along with our podcast, Protecting Hope, Stories of Successful Sustainable Tourism, and Tourism Talk Tuesdays are the primary ways you can engage with this ongoing community. We also offer a virtual conference every 2 years focused on sustainable tourism, and the next one will be in November of 2024. Every 6 months, we publish a full calendar of our activities on our website, and I believe my colleague Audrey Ramsey will be sharing the link in the chat for our website that has this full calendar of activities. That's the best place to follow along so that you're able to participate. So thank you all for being here and joining us in these community activities. We hope you continue to participate and invite your colleagues to do so as well. As we get started, I'd like to ask everyone on the call to please keep your microphone on mute to help facilitate a clear connection. I'd also like to ask for everyone to please introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know who you are and where you're joining from today. I see many new friends, many old colleagues, and former and present participants in the list of people that are joining us here today. But we'd like to get to know from all of you, so please utilize that chat to let us know who you are and where you're joining us from. Towards the end of the program, we'll be taking some questions from the audience. We'd like to ask that you use the chat function of Zoom to share any questions that you have. And we'll work on sorting through those questions throughout the session, and we'll do our best to answer as many of those questions as possible towards the end of the session. I always find it helpful to set some expectations on webinars like this. So this session is expected to be 1 hour in length and will be conducted as a plenary session. We will not be using breakout groups in this session. My colleague, Audrey Ramsey, is on the call. And if you have any questions about any of our activities, or if you have any technical difficulties, please feel free to reach out to her for any clarification. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with the topic of the day, sustainable tourism product development, achieving balance and contributing to the quality of life proposition of your place. I'd like to introduce a close collaborator of our center and our facilitator of today's session, Bonnie Lippitt. Bonnie has a long career of working with the U.S. National Park Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the U.S. Forest Service. This has included a number of international details to work across Africa and Latin America on projects related to sustainable tourism, interpretation, and protected area management. She retired this past year, but Bonnie wasted no time joining our center's executive committee and supporting us as a member of our core team on the implementation of our sustainable tourism community of learning and practice. Thank you, Bonnie, for being here, and I'll now turn it over to you to facilitate this session.
Thank you, Ryan, and hello to everyone. It's great to be here today. I'm really pleased to introduce our speaker today, Andrew Grossman. I met Andrew many years ago, and we're both friends and have been work colleagues for many, many years in the Pacific Northwest part of the country, Oregon and Washington. I first met Andrew when he was working with Sustainable Travel International, and shortly thereafter, he took a job with the Oregon Tourism Office, that's known as Travel Oregon, and he was on the destination development staff there. And so our paths crossed literally weekly for many years, because so many projects that were and products that were being developed in partnership with the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management and the National Park Service, as well as state parks, public land managers, and working together with us in our gateway communities. I actually, it sometimes only feels like a year, but I actually retired in April of 2020. So it's been almost 3 years. And at about the same time that I retired, Andrew accepted a job in Colorado at the Colorado Tourism Office as their director of destination development and management. And so we're really pleased to have someone with his level of expertise in the tourism industry, and also all of the experience that he's personally and professionally had traveling the world and looking at and experiencing sustainable tourism products. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrew. Thanks for being here today, Andrew.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, whole CSU team. And it's wonderful to see so many new faces. It's pretty rare that I get to talk to an entirely new group of people. So definitely excited, but I'm also really interested to see what kind of questions you have later on in the session. As Bonnie mentioned, I'm Andrew, Director of Destination Development for Colorado Tourism Office. And I guess I didn't realize that, Bonnie, that we both made major life changes in April 2020 when everybody else was sort of stuck at their house. I decided to quit my job and jump in my truck and move from Oregon to Colorado. And it sounds like Bonnie decided to enjoy her lovely retirement that she's at. So it's really great to be here. I'm just going to start usually by explaining what the Colorado Tourism Office is. I think that's a great place to kind of ground us in a lot of the kind of talking points or content that I have to share with you all today. So we are the Destination Marketing and Management Organization for the state of Colorado, and we exist as a division of the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade, or what we call OEDIT. It sounds robotic. I swear I'm human. And we have a mission to achieve and sustain a healthy Colorado economy that works for everyone and protects what makes Colorado the best state in the country to live, work, start a business, raise a family, and retire. What's interesting is that we're also considered one of the offices of the governor. And I bring that up to say that, you know, one thing that's very, very interesting about the US travel industry is that state tourism offices are set up differently across the country, the way that they're funded, the way that they're structured, where they're located within state government. For example, Travel Oregon, my old organization, was a semi-independent entity, so sort of not really quasi-governmental, but wasn't really connected to the governor's office. So there's pros and cons to all of this. But one thing that's very interesting is that I think there's less than 10 and more than 5 state tourism offices that even have a destination development team. And I'll explain more about what this means here in a second. But of those between 5 to 10, I only know of 3 of them that have more than 1 staff. So it's definitely a really unique role within state tourism. You do see a lot more jurisdictional DMOs or destination marketing organizations that have destination development functions. But I bring all this up to say that I'm pretty sure I'm the only person in the country that's worked in 2 different destination development teams at the state level. And I don't mean that to say that I'm special. It's really just to acknowledge how niche this function is within state tourism offices. Also, this is our team here at the CTO, again, Colorado Tourism Office. We're about 19 or so people these days. When I joined, we were 11, and some of that was a contraction during COVID, but we also are in a bit of a growth trajectory of kind of bringing more of our capacity in-house, which is a great direction because it brings more of our thought leadership in-house as well. But we're primarily broken up into 2 buckets, with sort of consumer marketing, with it being domestic marketing on the left, and then international marketing on the right. And then I exist within the destination stewardship team, which has the destination development function, also has our grants and funding programming, as well as our welcome centers, and then a series of other industry programs, as well as our governor's conference, which is our annual professional development conference for the Colorado tourism industry. We recently released, I guess it was recent as in September, so about 6 months ago, our most recent strategic plan is called Colorado Tourism Roadmap 2.0. It's really rooted in 3 major pillars of destination stewardship, economic vitality, and industry leadership. And we exist to advance our work plan through collaboration, inclusivity, innovation, and leadership. But I'm using this term destination stewardship. I'm using this term destination development. In some ways, we're in the process of probably merging the two terms in many different ways. So what does this mean for the state of Colorado? It means that the Colorado Tourism Office and its partners support Colorado tourism destinations in a way that balances quality of life for residents, quality of experience for visitors, while also enhancing our environment and communities. And I think another way to really look at it is that we're really talking a lot about balance right now at the Colorado Tourism Office and in collaboration with our industry partners. How much economic prosperity do we need? How much economic business do we need to maintain a healthy business economy, while also making sure that we're not, creating a situation where the amount of visitation that's occurring in destinations is reducing a level of comfort that's beyond the capacity of our communities, while also making sure that we have, protections in place to make sure that we are, protecting our natural environment, protecting our landscapes, and really trying to find that Venn diagram, the center of that Venn diagram. And what's really interesting is that I can't draw that for communities. If at best we can start to figure out what this means at the state level, but every single destination that we work in really has to define what the center of that Venn diagram is for themselves. So I hope you all know where Colorado is. I just wanted to kind of share that too before I started getting too deep into my presentation. So we are, in the mountain time zone, right dab in the Rocky Mountains. And then this is also a picture of Colorado and the destinations that my team has been working in, again, just as a way to kind of ground the conversation. We are very square-like as a state. And I swear I'm not colorblind. The colors here, and I'll just quickly say this so that we got a CARES Act Recovery Assistance Grant back in January of 2021, and that allowed us to really scale up our destination development programming. If you're a green destination, we worked with you last year and this year. If you're a red destination, we just worked with you last year. And if you're a blue destination, we've only been working with you this year. There's 38 different destinations on this map. And when I say work with them, I just want to kind of quickly state that too, is that, really the destination development team, the team that I oversee, we exist to serve as an extended strategy and implementation team for our destination marketing organization, or again, DMO partners. We really meet them where they're at and identify, one or more projects that we can advance with them within a 12-month timeframe. Once we identify what that project is, we have a suite of services that are available, such as an assessment, so access to research. We do function by delivering workshops with community members, so participatory community visioning and action planning workshops, if you will. And then we also have technical assistance grants. So we have a cohort of consultants that we release into the wild under different hours of consulting hours, so anywhere between 75 and 100 hours to just do project-based work. And I think really those are the mechanisms that are going to be kind of behind the scenes for everything else I'm going to be talking about today. So yeah, there's 38 different destinations on that map of Colorado that I showed, and I keep alluding to, like, every destination truly is special, but there are trends across them. And again, a lot of what we try to do is find that balance, right? So trying to balance, an understanding of the unique context within a destination, but also, learning from our experience of working with destinations to understand what the trends are across them, depending on where they are in the destination life cycle. So hopefully you've all seen Richard Butler's tourism area life cycle model. I believe it's from 1980, which means it predates my existence as a human. But it certainly is, a really foundational way to think about tourism development and management. Although, times have changed in the, I guess, 42 years or so, 43 years since this graphic came out. So I really have taken my own twist on it. I think it's a little, I think 6 stages is too many. Maybe I'm part of the TikTok generation, but I really see it as, there's emerging destinations, there's intermediate destinations, and then there's established destinations. And that's what I mean by every destination is unique, but depending on where they are in the life cycle, we can start to identify trends on, potentially their challenges, but more importantly, their opportunities and the way that we can make investments in those destinations to frankly move them up the ladder of the destination life cycle. And another way to think about this is that, if you're an emerging destination, we're typically working with you on visitor readiness activities. If you're an intermediate destination, we're typically working with you on visitor experience activities. And then if you're an established destination, we're typically working with you on visitor management strategies. And none of this stuff is black and white, but it definitely just provides some lanes of operation. There are honestly some destinations that I feel like exhibit characteristics of emerging, intermediate, and established at the same time. And I actually think I have a couple examples that exhibit kind of both stages. But at the very least, if you find one of these stages in a destination, there's typically a series of solutions that you can apply to it. I also think that Butler's graphic was missing a dotted line of carrying capacity, although I would argue that it was probably implied at stagnation of, that's why that stagnation line exists. But, really, the way that I like to look at it is you drop a line at the top of this, and then we as destination engineers can implement activities that increase the actual or even the perceived carrying capacity of a destination to push it into that rejuvenation stage. And what I mean by that is, you might have congestion in a destination. If you build more parking lots, if you drop visitor transportation systems that reduce the need for passenger vehicles, if you create a smarter visitor by offering visitor behavior messaging and trailhead ambassador programs, these are the types of things that we can do as destinations to increase that, again, actual or a perceived carrying capacity, and increase the amount of tourists you can have in those established destinations. Because I'm going to walk you through just a little bit deeper into how we think about each of these 3 stages. And again, Colorado has all 3 of these throughout the state, and all the 38 destinations that we've been working in sit within one of these stages. So what is an emerging destination? Well, these are the types of things that we will see in them when we start to do our analysis of them, is that they're often just at the beginning of shifting from an extractive-based economy to one that includes tourism as part of their industries. They often lack accurate, publicly available information about the destination. They do have some signature assets with potential, but they probably lack infrastructure related to them, as well as business services related to them. They also lack a strong tourism season. Typically, when we look at annual visitation in these places, it's actually rather flat, but low in number. You don't really see a lot of bumps in kind of peaks within visitation. But again, it's at the low end of the visitor numbers. More importantly, they also lack a strong tourism leadership structure. So they don't typically have a functional destination marketing organization. And even if they do, they don't really have dedicated funding, or it's one or the other. And what I mean by dedicated funding is often a bed tax, lodging tax, some sort of tourism related tax, so that when visitors are spending dollars, there's funding that's being collected that can go back into the development, management, and promotion of tourism. And this is one that we actually see in some of our resident sentiment surveys, is that another way that we can kind of tell if someone's emerging is that the residents are like, we don't have tourism. We're not a destination. And we actually get a lot of those comments in places across Colorado that are in this stage. So what can we do with destinations that are in this stage? So we can compile information about available experiences and business services. We can then start to produce digital and/or physical tourism planning content. How do we build awareness of that accurate information about the destination? We can start to offer frontline staff training on customer service and local knowledge. Another thing about emerging is that you ask somebody at the grocery store or at a restaurant, what is there to do? They say, nothing, get out of here. I grew up here. And I was, well, that's probably not true. There's a lot that you can do here. And how can we help to educate those staff on that? You might need to be establishing a dedicated funding source for tourism. Again, setting up that lodging tax. You might need to be establishing a local tourism advisory board or establishing a DMO. You might also want to start to host events during what you see as the most opportune times of year to visit, as a way to help to build your reputation and start to create that repeat visitor. Let's look at intermediate real quick. So these destinations typically have a season with high demand, but then observe steep drops otherwise. So you look at back at that annual visitation, typically what we see is in the summertime, you'll start to see that peak, but then it'll be flat around the other 3 seasons. This could also be a primarily winter destination, and you would see kind of that peak in the winter, but then a flattening on the other 3 seasons. As a result of that, there's typically a narrow visitor demographic due to a lack of diverse experiences. There's one high season with likely one experience that you can do, so it really limits the diversity of kind of who's coming. And that's another way to look at this. They're also experiencing workforce challenges because they're trying to keep up with demand during that peak, but then they really have a hard time maintaining a stable workforce throughout the rest of the year, which really inhibits their ability to grow their tourism season. Signature assets, so that one thing to do during that high period of time is beginning to also start to feel overcrowded. So they are starting to feel that congestion during that one thing to do during one kind of high time. And then really more importantly is that these destinations are often vulnerable due to being dependent on tourism or a growing dependency on tourism without that risk mitigation. If that one thing to do during that one time of year that's high goes away, they typically lose their tourism economy very, very quickly. So what can we do? We can do tourism product diversification. We could start to look at things, at least here in the Western states, but I do think these 3 are pretty relevant. You could look at advancing agritourism programming. I love agritourism because everybody eats 3 times a day typically. So you've got 3 chances to create tourism product that can really diversify what there is to do. You could look at outdoor recreation as something to do. I think one thing that we've started to look at outdoor recreation as is international dark sky certification or kind of stargazing opportunities. If you have that, people have to stay overnight to look at the stars, and you can connect that to nature. And then cultural tourism is a great way to sprinkle interpretation throughout the entire experience and create a more rich experience and sort of sense of place for visitors. You also might want to start to address tourism and seasonality during off-peak times of year. If you've got that high season in the summertime, how can we start to build out other peaks throughout the year and really focus our investments on those? And this is really, really a big one for us for intermediate, is that it's extremely important that we start to increase our engagement with the local business community, because they are going to be huge partners in our ability to either build awareness of that tourism product diversification as we bring new products online. How is the business community assisting us? And then also, if we want to start to address tourism seasonality, we need these businesses to partner with us and really trust us and go down the journey of, let's start to build up our business hours of operation during times that we may not be confident visitors are coming. And then in established destinations, these often have a year-round tourism economy with diverse opportunities and demographics. There is a lot to do. There's a lot of great infrastructure. But I think what we start to see here is that, there starts to be impacts on the natural and built environment. And that's not only by visitors, it's also just by residents. There's a lot of people enjoying all there is to do in the destination. Visitors do start to report congestion and decreased satisfaction, as do residents as well. And more importantly, workforce is not able to meet the demands of visitors. Typically, what we're seeing now in Colorado is that housing becomes an issue as sort of housing prices go up. Getting access to workforce starts to become a major challenge. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning with balance, we start to see that residents are losing a sense of comfort in their community. So what can we do? We can start to address visitor behavior, which could be launching a visitor behavior messaging campaign. I used to work with Bonnie, as we mentioned, back in Oregon. We had a take care out there program. Here in Colorado, we have a Do Colorado Right program. We've also, seen folks start to launch trailhead ambassador programs. So position kind of voices of reason, if you will, at high priority trailheads that say, hey, before you get on the trail, these are the types of things we want you to really think about. Maybe they start to give out dog poop bags as a way to start to try to reduce that impact. You could also look at increasing visitor transportation options, which could be shuttles. It could also just be creating more opportunities for bike related travel, with the goal here of reducing passenger vehicles. A big one here too is that this is where in the intermediate, it's really increasing your engagement with the business community. When you start to be established, you want to start to have the tourism partners really increase their relationship with other entities in the community and really broaden the scope of their investments. How can tourism be part of the solution for for housing challenges? Can tourism be part of larger solutions for public land management? Again, each destination is different, but we do see our partners start to really broaden their role in this space. So quickly want to end with a couple success stories about ways that we've worked with different partners in Colorado and really identified their space within the life cycle, and hopefully give you some idea of, what do we really mean by all of this at the end of the day. So the city of Woodland Park is right near Pikes Peak Mountain, and it's right near Colorado Springs. What's interesting is that they actually had a 5.2% lodging tax, so they had dedicated funding, but they didn't really have any specific tourism leadership structure that was in place. So funding was being collected, but at the time it was going to another local entity that was doing great work, but it wasn't really serving as a tourism leadership structure. As a result of that, there were different local factions of stakeholders that were kind of identified this gap in leadership, and they were working, unfortunately, in competition with each other. And as a result, visitation was happening, the lodging tax was there, people were coming to the area, but without that structure, visitation and visitor behavior were starting to become unmanageable. So what we did was we came in, we developed a rapid destination management plan. We then developed a job description for a tourism director, as well as an example tourism budget. As part of that, we then worked with the city that then got that job description approved, as well as the budget approved. We ended up actually getting two different job descriptions approved. There was what ended up being called the economic development director and an economic development specialist. And the economic development director, I think they were doing second round of interviews last month. So I'm hoping that they announce who this person is here soon. And we're really excited to see this new person come online. And what's interesting is that what is essentially a tourism director is actually split as kind of probably 40% tourism director, 40% Main Street services. So looking at sort of ways to assist with the businesses and beautification on Main Street, and then 20% traditional economic development and business retention and attraction. And what we did is sort of look at, what is that leadership structure that we set up? And we've been doing quite a few of these right now in the state of Colorado, of really taking areas that, in these emerging stages of the life cycle, they didn't really have a leadership structure. How can we come in and say, hey, here's how other areas are structured? So pretty exciting project. And I never thought I'd be in the business of job creation. I always said I was in the business of job retention or diversification. And then Lake City, Hinsdale County is over on the western slope for Colorado. I believe this is the most remote town in the state of Colorado, which is exciting to be a part of. It's also a ghost town. At some point, I can tell you a story about it, about the time I saw a ghost when I stayed there one night. But ultimately, a great example of an intermediate destination. They had an established summer tourism season, but really flat throughout the rest of the year. And there was a misconception that it was really closed during the wintertime. We partnered with them to convene those stakeholders and again, convene the business community to understand how we could all collaborate to grow its winter tourism season. The DMO came out really swinging in many different ways to say that it was here to help and implement activities for the collective benefit of businesses. We started launching a series of strategies that included one of the big issues was we didn't know what businesses were open during the wintertime, during different days, and every hotel had its own list that was different. So the DMO just did a bunch of engagement and said, when are you open? What are your hours? And they kept a public digital list that I'll kind of show you right here that was set up that is now that everybody shares. And it really helps look at how you can optimize business openings throughout the week, because now businesses know, hey, we don't all need to be open on Tuesday. As long as a few of us are open on every day, we'll be able to maintain a healthy winter economy. But we also set up an Eat Local campaign for residents to go out and spend money at businesses to help keep them open during the winter. We compiled new inspirational content about different types of experiences, so did product diversification. We then looked at who might be coming, and we looked at drive market campaigns, so did targeted promotional campaigns to folks that might be driving in for the day to try to come in and experience Lake City. We also got a targeted media contact list, and I showed you the What's Open list. What's nice is that, because we've been able to work with them, there's been a lot of really wonderful press about Lake City in the last, 4 or 5 months this winter that really kind of starts to put it on the map as a winter destination. And that's, again, been the great collaboration between the Colorado Tourism Office and this area. Just a couple testimonials. I really like this second one because I know I'm probably going longer than Bonnie and Ryan want me to right now, but I think this is my last slide. But ultimately, this line of listening to the county commissioners meeting this morning, and they were discussing how successful the ice park is this winter and how the businesses that are open have freely been sharing how their business has increased this year as a result, and that those who are open are benefiting from the increased traffic. We started working with them in October of 2021, essentially, and the first winter was really the planning. But as you can see, this is really then looking at winter 2022. So just a few months ago, within, less than 2 years, we took in many ways kind of a non-existent winter season, and we didn't create a full winter season, but now we're starting to see peaks in their visitation. And it's kind of a 2 steps forward, 1 step backward approach, where you really have to look at your off season. We've been calling it peak within off peak, or POP. We love acronyms in tourism. And so, okay, where are those opportune times that we can start to look at growing? And that's where they started to drop some events and started to look at the businesses and say, hey, if you open for these couple of weeks, trust us, we're going to collaborate on trying to get more business. So it's been really exciting to do this in Lake City. We've been working with other destinations on this, but I'll be honest, this is the one that has been the most successful and the one that we're the most proud of. So that's all I got prepared. I think just to set the stage, I'm excited to see what questions Bonnie has and then what questions the group has.
Yes, thank you so much, Andrew. It's a way to think about our protected areas in a broader context. And that is a question I'd like for you to address for the group. And that's, what are some examples that you've experienced of ways that public land managers have developed effective relationships with their gateway communities and local tourism organizations? How you've had a lot of experience working. I can tell you that Andrew is a specialist in U.S. Forest Service participating agreements. But what are the things that we as land managers can do to take this information that you're sharing with us and think about how we can help work best in our gateway communities?
Yes, I'll try to kind of go high level and then give an example from my past life, I guess. But I think in many ways, I alluded to it in sort of the intermediate destination stage, where I really think the product, whenever there's a land manager involved, the reason why visitors are coming to an area, if not entirely because of, but certainly partially because of the land that's being managed by the land manager. So there's an intrinsic connection between the inspiration for travel to a place when there's public land involved and then access to that public land. So really looking at how can those land managers become more present and visible with the business community. And I think that's really a great place to start, is really consider yourself in that intermediate destination stage where it's really understanding how the tourism business community can serve as an extension of you. And I think that's really one of the things that I valued so much about the relationship between the U.S. Forest Service and the BLM and Travel Oregon was that, we really trusted the BLM and the Forest Service to be the land managers and sort of drive the tone for, what needed to be done on those locations. But then we served as their extended mouthpiece as tourism. We were in many ways the communicators often in that relationship. So really looking at, what can you bring to the table? What can we bring to the table? So for example, if you're, a public land manager and, you have information you want to have shared with visitors before they arrive, the tourism business community can be a great conduit for that information. So it's really understanding what's our comparative advantage together as partners. And then I guess the example that I'll give is, I used to work in southern Chile in Torres del Paine National Park when I was at Sustainable Travel International. And long story short, we set up a foundation called the Torres del Paine Legacy Fund that existed to collect donations from visitors that then went back into investments into the park, specifically for boardwalks on the W Trail, most notably, which was their signature experience during a high time of year. So, I would say that they were probably at risk of having that experience go south, and you would lose kind of the primary reason for why people would come. But what was really nice about that program was it was so much more than just a way to collect donations from visitors. And the way that we did it was if you were purchasing a trip from the US, the UK, or Australia to southern Chile, $50 to $100 is being collected as part of a much broader cost of that experience. These are in the thousands of dollars. That money would then get sent to my old organization. We would put it in a reserve account and then give out local grants to, again, the park to build boardwalks on the W Trail. But we worked in tandem with CONAF, which was the land management company, as well as the tourism businesses, to create a narrative about what the place was, and used it as an opportunity to do visitor behavior messaging too. So really looking at, if you're presenting a place, so you're driving that inspiration, what is that consistent message you want to convey about it? It's that we care about Torres del Paine National Park. That's the role of the operator that's selling the location. And then when you arrive in the destination, you might be staying in a hotel in Puerto Natales, the gateway community. Everybody that worked in those properties, maybe they had a hat that said Torres del Paine Legacy Fund. Maybe there was a woodblock that said Torres del Paine Legacy Fund. They could talk about how they cared about the destination and respected the public land. And then you got into the park, and you're walking on these boardwalks that say brought to you by the Torres del Paine Legacy Fund. And they created this total consistent communication, certainly in the way I'm describing it, which sounds like all this happened in a vacuum. But I do think it is building those relationships and understanding what the land managers bring to the table, what the tourism businesses bring to the table, and what the local government can bring to the table as well.
Yeah, thank you. Another question I have for you is, we often, as protected area managers, particularly in some of our countries where really are the not just national, but, the idea is to have an international destination. How do you think about the products that you develop for national audiences, residents of that country, versus the idea that it's good to seek international visitors? And how do those products different? But more importantly, is it better to start local if you're starting fresh, if you're emerging? How do you think about what kinds of products are really going to build an emerging destinations foundation to get to a more established destination?
That's a great question. I think that, and this might just be my approach at the end of the day, but whatever product you're going to develop has to speak to the competitive advantage of your area. So the first step is understanding, what do you have to offer as a destination that's a unique differentiator? Because you definitely don't want to be building product that's outside of your competitive advantage. And at least here in the Western states, I feel rather confident that, the lanes of operation that we have to operate through are agritourism. Again, everybody eats 3 times a day. There's a lot of great opportunities to experience local food here in the Western states of the US. You've got outdoor recreation. Colorado, I believe, is 40-something% public land. Oregon was closer to 60, unless Bonnie's going to slap my wrist if I got that percentage wrong. Nevada is 92% or so. So there's a huge percentage of public land that creates opportunities for outdoor recreation. And then, we have a rich, eclectic history, tribal history, pioneer history, present histories for cultural tourism. We also have scenic drives for us. There's a huge scenic byway opportunity to just engage in a car and drive around our roads. And then increasingly we have stargazing opportunities, which is what's behind me in my photos. So those are the lanes which we typically operate, because we know that it evokes a sense of place and builds on that unique destination character that allows us to put our best foot forward. So I would challenge really each of you to understand what your competitive advantage is and make sure that any product you develop operates within those lanes. To your point, Bonnie, about, how do we develop product for, a national audience versus an international audience? I would just say that, the way that I've always done product development is I take the most complex first, which is what would I need to do in order to work with my global sales team or my international sales team to get this product sold at International Travel Berlin, or what ITB. I'm gonna have that acronym wrong. It's like the biggest trade show in the world. What do I need to have done to prepare it for the international audience? So I work backwards from the most complex first. And I think that's fine, actually, because truly with product development, and it's sort of an old idiom, but if you build it, they will come to some extent, as long as you're doing it in a way that evokes your sense of place and your competitive advantage. that allows you to track the visitor that's the right fit for your destination. Because if you start to build product that don't evoke that sense of place or don't leverage your competitive advantage, you're going to start to see a mismatch between your resident community and the visitors that are starting to come. And that's only going to end up creating conflict over time. So if you can continue to, find that balance of what is the right product for us, and you start to present it to the world in an effective way, you're going to drive visitation in the way that makes the most sense for you.
So I have one last question, and then we'll be turning it over to Ryan, who's probably furiously looking through the questions that our audience has posting on the chat. And that question has to do with, do you have any examples of how protected areas and communities, their gateway communities, have worked together to create policies and products that provided appropriate boundaries for visitors and sort of promoted respectful cultural practices and really, it wasn't just rules and regulations, you can't do this, you can't do that, but to really think about, in that sense of place, what parts of that place are reserved for the community as opposed to the visitors, and how to start to have those conversations.
So I learned two things last year that really stick out to me in kind of my work, because I do think that there's been this belief, and maybe it was just me and I'm off base, which I often am, but you look at like, what does success look like through this work? And I would have told you that, having a year-round tourism economy is our goal. And really looking at visitor dispersion is our goal when you look at those kind of established destinations. And what we're starting to hear from established mountain communities in Colorado is that, residents need a break. So there are, times throughout the year that they really want to see the spigot of tourism slow down. It's not going to be during your high season, but maybe it's during those kind of shoulder seasons, or mud season, as we sometimes call it here in Colorado. Is that a time in which we can, meet our residents in the middle and say, look, we're gonna slow down. We're gonna give the business community a break for 30 days. We're gonna try to give the residents a break. I'll caveat this by saying that, DMOs don't control the world. Just because we stop promoting doesn't mean people stop going to destinations either. But it's part of our opportunity is to look at what could those downtimes be. And then the other one, which I think is relevant to Bonnie's question, is this concept of visitor dispersion. And I think it's really up to destinations to determine whether or not that's a strategy for them. Because we do have areas in Colorado right now where the local government has worked closely with the land management community to say, this protected area, this is where we want to be driving visitors. We're going to continue to build out the walkways, make sure that those are well fortified for increased use. We're going to establish visitor transportation systems that cut down passenger vehicle traffic. We're going to set up bike shares to get people from visitor centers to that scenic viewpoint. And frankly, we're going to follow the kind of the tone that the national parks have set. I think national parks in the US have done a fantastic job of demonstrating how to take that line of carrying capacity and increase it. It's not finite. It's not infinite, the amount that you can increase carrying capacity, but you can absolutely increase it in different ways. And what we're seeing is that there are parts of Colorado right now that are really looking at these, okay, what are our signature public land areas? How can we build them up like mini national parks, drive our visitors to them? Because in many ways, that's what they're seeing on Instagram. Let's give them that experience. But as a result, let's make sure that we're not just opening up other parts of the destination that may not be ready for visitation. They may not have the infrastructure, which make it susceptible to increased erosion on trails, for example. Even if it's less visitors than you're seeing in those high use areas, the trails haven't been built for the level of visitation that you might get to them if you do dispersion. So really, we are starting to see a relationship between local communities, destination marketing organizations, and land managers to say, let's look at our area from above. Let's pick those areas that we want to be driving a lot of visitation to, and let's keep local gems local and sort of undiscovered.
Thank you, Andrew. So I am going to turn it back over to Ryan, who has been sorting through the questions you as our audience have had. and to see if there's some additional wisdom we can pluck from Andrew's brain before we all move on to our work days or our end of day relaxation. So Ryan.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Andrew, for the great presentation and bringing about, I think, a lot of different aspects to tourism that's got people thinking about their own sites and next steps in implementing some of the ideas you've talked about. We have a number of questions here, and so we'll do our best to get to as many of them as we can. The first question is related to revenue or funding. And the question is, what sources of revenue or funding would you suggest that our listeners consider to promote destination marketing and development that might warrant wider use internationally? You've mentioned a couple of ways that this gets funded at the local level, but what are some of the ideas that you have for folks from around the world?
Yeah, so I think when I talk about tourism funding, another way to really say it longer is sustainable. So funding that exists for longer periods of time, that's also got a sense of protectionism associated to it. So, how can we find those funding sources that are, enacted, that will continue to provide revenue, and that, are pretty well protected to people putting their hands in the cookie jars, essentially. And on the other side of the spectrum, you would say oh yeah, let's apply for grants every year. That is short-term funding, but it's rather protected. The other thing you could do is think that you're going to get an allocation from a general fund or other tax collections, that every year you've got to, make a case for a budget, but that every year it might go away. So really, I think tying your revenue to point of sale from visitors within the destination is really the way that I talk about this with people. And I've alluded to bed taxes, lodging taxes. Those are often really strong because residents aren't paying into it. So it's very easy to make the case that this funding is coming from the visitor economy, and therefore it should go back in investments in the visitor economy. That's a really strong way to do it. I think Colorado is very unique in that there are 5 different types of tourism-related taxes in this state. I won't bore you with them because some of them are uniquely Coloradan, but the best way to describe it is there are some tourism taxes in Colorado that are collected by the state and then redistributed back to a jurisdictional destination. There are some taxes that are just collected within a jurisdiction, so it's collected by the local municipality or the local government. And both of those would be on lodging nights. You can also see food and beverage taxes. So Ashland, Oregon is an example of a destination with a food and beverage tax. Montrose, Colorado is an example destination with a food and beverage tax. One of the challenges with that is that you are effectively taxing locals for access to the types of experiences that make their destination better because of tourism. So, that would be something to consider, is that now you're potentially levying a tax on residents. And as you get more established, what we also see is that the price of things goes up and residents start to lose access to what they thought they were getting in the first place. So really focusing yourself on point of sale within the visitor economy that doesn't touch that doesn't raise prices for your local community is a great way to look at it. And then really understand the statutes in your area to know if, is there a way to set up a tax that's collected by a bigger government? I don't know if it's a state government or a country government, and then redistribute it back to you. That reduces administration on your end. Typically, they do take a small percentage for their own administration, but it makes it easier for you as a small community or a small destination to basically get access to these funds. Or you could set it up locally. The thing I did in Torres del Paine, I'll quickly kind of close with this, that was a voluntary assessment that the business community applied on itself. So it was not a formal tax. It was more of a voluntary assessment, and we can see those two as business assessments as a way to get funding. I would say that those might be protected, but they also have the ability, people could just stop making those contributions. So I really think that a regulatory based approach that focuses on point of sale systems related to lodging that you can add a small percentage to, or potentially $1 a night fee to, is a great way to create sustainable protected revenue for tourism activities.
Great. Well, and I think you pretty much answered follow-up question, which is very related to thinking about these taxes, but maybe just a slight alteration of thinking about if there's a recommended point in time where you might engage in that conversation about creating a new tax if that tax is not already in existence, especially in light of other taxes that might already be levied for things like transportation that are related to tourism. This is another question coming from our audience.
Yeah, so I think, and maybe I'll kind of take a step back for a second too, because I think I answered that question from the Colorado context. And to put myself in what I can only imagine, or at least maybe some of your shoes, right, where you've got these protected areas, but I saw something about suppliers later on in the question, and we don't have traditional suppliers in Colorado. Maybe I can explain that more when I get to that section. But a lot of our protected areas internationally that at least I've traveled to, right, is that you've got what are called sort of outbound operators in other countries that are selling experiences to your protected area. When that happens, there's a margin, there's a percentage of the cost of that trip that's being kept out of your destination by the one that's selling the trip through. It's essentially a co-marketing agreement. But let's just say that the trip is $1,000. They could be taking 30% of that, and that means that $700 is then arriving in the destination. The question would be, do you want to start to increase the cost of a hotel night stay in a destination incrementally at 1% to try to collect revenue for your area? Or do you want to start to try to collect the revenue from where it's being sold from the outbound standpoint? And that's the approach that we took with Tourist del Pine, is I didn't want to keep applying costs on the local business community in the destination that was frankly responsible for delivering the experience when the point of sale for the trip is actually happening out of the destination. And that was a way to basically set up a system in which, if you're an outbound operator as well, let's just say that, I am working in a protected area in the Azores and someone in Sydney, Australia is selling trips to the Azores. That person in Sydney, Australia does not have any autonomy over the quality of visitor experience in the Azores. They just have a trip that they've packaged up that they've sold to the Azores. There's actually a vested interest in those partners, at least the ones that I would want to be doing business with, to say, how can they make investments in the Azores to make sure that the quality of visitor experience in the Azores remains strong? Because if that quality of visitor experience goes down, they lose access to their own revenue. So when you're in a situation where you've got out of country outbound operators that are sending folks to your protected areas, I think that's actually a fantastic place to look for extracting revenue out of those areas to then bring money into your visitor economy. You also have to look at too, I wouldn't be taxing people at every point of the way, right? Let's just say in this hypothetical scenario, I'm living in Sydney, Australia. I buy $1,000 trip from Sydney all the way to São Miguel in the Azores. I've gotten taxed at that point of sale. I then get in my shuttle bus from the airport to the community. There's a 1% fee on the shuttle bus. I'm at the hotel. I'm now paying 3% to something else. I go to a restaurant. There's now 1% on there. That's probably not the best way to go about this. I would say look at every single time in which a visitor makes an expenditure in your destination. Isolate the ones that residents would also be paying into and kind of push those to the side, and then look at what remains. And that becomes those different times in which you could look at applying some sort of regulatory or voluntary based assessment system to get that funding out and then back into your pocket.
Great, thank you. And then this will be our final question. I think you've kind of responded to the suppliers question. So this last question is really focused on the sustainability side of sustainable tourism, and how much does the sustainable aspects of a destination, the operations of its partners, how the land management agency is operating in a sustainability context plays into the sellability of a destination or the interest of the visitors? Or is it just like it's nice add-on, but really price is really the ultimate question of, so how much, or what are some levers that destinations might utilize on the sustainability front because both they need to, they have to, they should, or because it actually helps draw in more people?
So I've been a sustainable tourism professional my entire career. I think Bonnie and I met when I was an unpaid intern back in 2011. So years and years ago. And I think in general, like, it's something that we should be doing. So I'll just kind of start by saying that. I think that, those areas that focus on sustainability tend to have also a focus on quality too. So there's sort of an intrinsic link between sustainability and then quality. But unfortunately, visitors, this kind of fluctuates. And I would say a couple of years ago, the weight started going the other direction, but visitors don't really make decisions based on access to sustainability. Again, that is starting to change, but it also really fluctuates on the economy. So, where I think there were great strides being made towards sustainable tourism, when the recession hit in 2008, what's the first thing to go off the table? Paying more of premium for access to sustainability. It really does come down to cost to some extent. Truly, it's the old idiom of, if you've got two apples that are the same price and the same size, but one's red and one's green, and green would be sustainable, they'll then pick the green apple if they have that. You'll never be in that decision though. What I believe at this point is that, I feel so fortunate that in my role, I get to advance the concepts of sustainable tourism in collaboration with my partners. Are we promoting Colorado as a sustainable destination? At times, but it's more about how are we enabling visitors to make better decisions, because it is the right thing to do. So within my portfolio and in my job, I'm a Scenic and Historic Byways Commissioner. I'm in charge, in partnership with the Energy Office and the Department of Transportation, of the Colorado Electric Byway Program. We're in the process of installing charging stations along our scenic drives across Colorado to enable a transition from internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles in the state of Colorado. I helped pass legislation last year to do a Colorado Dark Sky Mentor Program, where we're now working with communities across the state to reduce their energy consumption and create more access to the night sky. Both of those are sustainable tourism programs, but we're not saying that. We're saying, come experience Colorado behind the wheel of an electric vehicle. Come experience the night sky in Colorado. By proxy, we're enabling the concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all for an excellent conversation today. As we prepare to close, I'd like to just make a plug for our next webinar that's going to take place on May 17th. That session will be conducted at the same time. And this one will feature Krista Valentino, Interim Executive Director of the Jackson Travel and Tourism Board. And she'll be talking with us about the Jackson, Wyoming Sustainable Destination Management Plan, what led to them wanting to create such a plan, and what the next steps will be in its implementation. So please mark your calendars to join us for that session as well. A big thanks today to Andrew for joining, for presenting, and for sharing all of your insight, to Bonnie for facilitation, and Audrey for tech support. And as always, thanks to the U.S. Forest Service International Programs for their ongoing partnership, collaboration, and support of this community of learning and practice. And thanks to the U.S. Agency for International Development for their funding support. Have a great day, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care.